When Emily and I first moved into the neighborhood, everything felt like a fresh start. After years of apartment living, we finally had a house, our house. A white colonial with navy shutters, a wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for summer barbecues. The kind of place we had dreamed about for years. Our first few weeks were a blur of unpacking, meeting new neighbors, and settling into a routine. Emily took to the neighborhood faster than I did. She was always the social one, always eager to introduce herself, while I preferred to ease into things. Then there was Nathan, our next-door neighbor. Nathan was in his late 30s, about our age, single, and incredibly charming. He had one of those effortless smiles, the kind that made you instantly like him. He was in great shape, lean, muscular, the type who probably ran 5 miles every morning before breakfast. He owned a landscaping business, which explained why his yard was the best on the block. Lush, green grass, flower beds that never seemed to have a single wilted petal, and a perfectly trimmed hedge that divided our properties. Emily met him first. I came home one evening to find them chatting on our front porch, both laughing like old friends. "This is Nathan," she said as I walked up. "Our next-door neighbor." Nathan shook my hand with a firm grip. "Nice to finally meet you, man. Your wife's been telling me all about your big move. Welcome to the neighborhood." That was the beginning. At first, it was great. Nathan was friendly, helpful, always willing to lend a hand. He gave me advice on yard work, offered to let me borrow tools, even helped me fix a loose gutter on our roof. Emily adored him. "It's nice having a neighbor like him," she said one night as we lay in bed. "Makes the place feel more like home." I agreed. Nathan was easygoing, fun to be around, and he seemed harmless. But then, little things started to change. Emily spent more and more time outside. She started taking an interest in gardening, which was odd considering she never cared about it before. At first, I chalked it up to the excitement of the new house. But then I started noticing how often Nathan was around. One Saturday, I came home from running errands and found them kneeling in our flower beds, their heads close together as they examined the soil. Emily's hands were covered in dirt, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, her smile wide as she laughed at something he said. She didn't even notice me walk up. I cleared my throat, and they both looked up. "Hey, babe," Emily said cheerfully. "Nathan was just teaching me how to keep these hydrangeas from wilting." Nathan gave me his usual easy grin. "Your wife's a natural. She's got the touch." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle, but I shook it off. I wasn't the jealous type. But then came the absences. Emily started going on quick trips that stretched into hours. Grocery runs that took twice as long as usual. Walks that extended well past sunset. One night, I woke up around midnight and found the bed empty. I frowned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes before getting up to check the house. The bathroom door was open, the kitchen was dark, and she wasn't in the living room. Then I noticed the back door. Slightly open. My pulse quickened as I stepped onto the porch, the cool night air sending a chill down my spine. I scanned the yard, and that's when I saw her. Emily. Standing by the fence. With Nathan. They were talking in hushed voices, too quiet for me to make out the words. But it wasn't the conversation that made my stomach tighten, it was the way she leaned in when he spoke. The way he touched her arm, his fingers lingering just a little too long. I stepped forward, the porch creaking under my weight. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes widening when she saw me. "Hey," she said quickly, stepping away from Nathan. I was just getting some air." Nathan nodded, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, we just ran into each other. Late-night stroll." A knot formed in my stomach, but I forced a smile. "Didn't realize you were still up." Emily gave a nervous laugh. "Couldn't sleep." I stared at her for a moment, then at Nathan. He met my gaze without flinching, his expression unreadable. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily and Nathan by the fence, their hushed voices, the way she stepped back when she saw me, like a kid caught sneaking out past curfew. By morning, I told myself I was overreacting. It was a coincidence. She needed air. He was outside. Nothing more. But I couldn't shake the feeling. At breakfast, Emily was unusually quiet. She sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Normally, she'd fill the silence with small talk, plans for the weekend, something funny she saw online, but that morning, nothing. I finally broke the quiet. "You were out late last night." She glanced up, blinking. "Huh. By the fence. With Nathan." "Oh." She gave a small shrug, setting her mug down. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I went outside. He happened to be out there, too. We just talked for a few minutes." A few minutes. I had stood there for at least 5, and they'd already been mid-conversation when I found them. I nodded slowly. "What were you talking about?" She hesitated. Just for a second. Barely noticeable. "Nothing, really. He was telling me about this new project he's working on." I held her gaze. "You seemed close." Emily frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I don't know. Just something about it felt off." She sighed, pushing back from the table. "I really don't like what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything." She shook her head, standing. "Look, Nathan's a friend, okay? He's been nothing but nice to us since we moved here. I don't understand why you're making this a thing." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that small hesitation, the brief flicker of something behind her eyes, stuck with me. And then the disappearing started. Over the next week, Emily became harder to reach. She'd go for coffee and come back hours later. She'd leave for a quick errand and return at sunset. I started paying attention. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always with her, face down. She started dressing nicer, wearing perfume when she ran to the store. One afternoon, I decided to test something. I came home early from work, earlier than usual. Emily had mentioned going to get groceries, but when I pulled into the driveway, her car wasn't there. Strange. I went inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and checked my phone. No messages. Then, just as I was about to sit down, I saw something through the kitchen window. Movement. In Nathan's backyard. I walked to the window, my pulse quickening. Emily. She was standing on his back porch, her arms crossed, laughing at something he said. He was close, too close, his body angled toward hers, his hand resting against the railing beside her. I felt something hot rise in my chest. I grabbed my phone, quickly dialing her number. From the window, I saw her jump slightly as the call vibrated in her hand. She looked down, then, without answering, slipped her phone back into her pocket. I gripped the counter, my jaw tightening. A minute later, she walked back toward the house, slipping through our back door as if nothing happened. I stayed by the window, waiting. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Emily's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "Hey. Hey, babe." Her voice was light, casual. "Sorry, I just got back from the store." "What's up?" I stared out at Nathan's porch, at the spot where she had been standing just now, lying to my face. "Nothing," I said slowly. "Just checking in." "Ah, that's sweet." She laughed softly. "I missed you." I swallowed, my grip tightening on the phone. "Yeah, me too. Lies. All of it." And now, I was sure of one thing. Something was going on. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The late-night conversations. The disappearing acts. The way she lied so easily over the phone while standing on Nathan's porch, as if deception had become second nature. Something was happening, and I was going to find out what. At first, I convinced myself I was overthinking. But paranoia doesn't make patterns. Paranoia doesn't make coincidences line up so perfectly. And now, once I really started paying attention, the patterns became impossible to miss. Emily had changed. At first, it was small things, the kind you could brush off as nothing. She started dressing differently, effortlessly attractive, like she was putting in effort but pretending she wasn't. Tight leggings when she went for a quick walk. Lip gloss for a coffee run. A faint trace of perfume when she came back from running errands. And the way she glowed when she returned. Relaxed. Energized. I started watching. Carefully. Subtly. Not in a paranoid way, just enough to notice. She became harder to reach. A quick errand turned into 3 hours missing. Text messages took longer to get a reply. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was always with her, always face down. And then, the early morning disappearances started. Emily had never been a morning person. She loved sleeping in, wrapped up in blankets, groggy until she had her first cup of coffee. But suddenly, she started waking up before sunrise. I'd hear her moving in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, fixing her hair. One morning, I pretended to stay asleep, listening. Then I heard the click of her grabbing her keys. "Where are you going?" I murmured, my voice groggy but clear. She froze in the doorway. "Oh," she said, too casual. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd go for a run." I almost laughed. Emily never ran. She barely tolerated light jogging. I pushed myself up on my elbows, blinking. "Since when do you go running?" She gave a breathy laugh. "I'm trying something new." I forced a small smile. "All right, have fun." She hesitated again, just for a second, before slipping out the door. I waited exactly 3 minutes. Then I got up, threw on a hoodie and sneakers, and stepped outside. I expected to see her on the sidewalk, maybe stretching, maybe actually running. But she was gone. Nowhere in sight. And that's when my stomach twisted. I had no real proof yet, just suspicions. But it was enough to push me forward. I walked down the block, turning toward the one place I knew she could be. Nathan's house. His curtains were drawn. His driveway was empty. No sign of movement. Then, just as I turned to leave, something caught my eye, through a small gap in the curtains. A shadow. Someone moving. And then, a flash of Emily's pink zip-up hoodie. My breath hitched. She wasn't running. She was inside Nathan's house. For a second, I stood frozen, my mind racing. Should I knock? Call her? Confront her right now? But something held me back. I needed more proof. So instead of barging in, I walked away. And I started planning. I wouldn't accuse her, not yet. That would give her time to come up with excuses, time to twist the truth. No, I needed to catch her in the lie. So I waited. That night, I was quiet. I didn't bring up the morning. Didn't push. Emily acted normal. Maybe a little tense, but normal enough that I could tell she thought I hadn't noticed anything. The next day, I left for work, but instead of driving far, I parked down the street and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 6:15 a.m., she left the house again. And this time, I followed her. I kept my distance, making sure not to be seen. She walked fast, head down, as if she had somewhere to be. And I already knew exactly where she was going. Nathan's house. I parked across the street, watching as she walked up to his door, looked around, then slipped inside without knocking. Without hesitation. As if she'd done it 100 times before. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I could go up there right now. I could barge in, demand answers, make them both face the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this was only the beginning. I needed to know everything. And when the moment came, she wouldn't see it coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid in bed next to Emily, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing. Every time she shifted in her sleep, I flinched, my mind replaying what I'd seen earlier, her walking into Nathan's house like she belonged there, like it was routine. I wanted to shake her awake. Demand answers. Make her tell me the truth. But I knew how that would go. She'd lie. She'd twist her words, make me question myself, tell me I was paranoid. I needed proof. Something she couldn't talk her way out of. So the next morning, I played along. I kissed her on the forehead before leaving for work, pretending everything was normal. Pretending I didn't know she was going to sneak off to Nathan's house the second I was gone. And just like the day before, I parked a few blocks away and waited. Sure enough, at 6:15 a.m. sharp, Emily left the house. Same pink hoodie. Same nervous glance over her shoulder. And the same destination. Nathan's place. Only this time, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to watch. I was going to catch them in the act. I spent the day preparing. First, I went to a hardware store and bought a miniature audio recorder, small enough to fit inside my pocket, but powerful enough to pick up voices through walls if placed in the right spot. Then, I took a detour to an electronics shop and bought something that made my stomach churn, a hidden camera disguised as a phone charger. It was the kind of thing paranoid people use to spy on their spouses. And now, I was one of them. That night, I waited until Emily fell asleep. Then I got up, heart pounding, and walked quietly to the living room. I needed to plant the camera somewhere she'd never suspect. Somewhere I knew she and Nathan would talk openly, thinking no one was listening. And that's when it hit me. The kitchen. It was perfect. Emily spent most of her time there, scrolling through her phone, making coffee, talking on speakerphone when she thought I wasn't paying attention. If she and Nathan ever spoke when I wasn't around, it would be there. I plugged the fake charger into the outlet near the counter, angling it just right. Then, I placed the audio recorder inside the decorative bowl on the dining table, hidden beneath a stack of napkins. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking. I had crossed a line. I was spying on my own wife. But deep down I knew, if she was innocent, I'd find nothing. And if she wasn't, then I needed to know. The next morning, I left the house like usual. But this time, I didn't drive away. Instead, I parked down the street and pulled up the hidden camera feed on my phone. At first, nothing. Just an empty kitchen. Then, at 6:20 a.m., the front door opened. Emily walked inside, moving quickly. Anxious. I turned up the volume. She was talking to someone. Then, a second voice. Nathan. I gritted my teeth, gripping the steering wheel as he followed her inside. Then I heard his voice, clear as day. No one saw you, right? Emily sighed. Of course not. But I feel like he's been acting weird lately. He doesn't know anything, Nathan said. Too confident. I clenched my jaw. You're sure? She asked. Nathan chuckled. Trust me. If he had any clue, do you think he'd still be acting normal? Emily hesitated. For a moment, I thought, maybe she feels guilty. Maybe she regrets it. Then she laughed softly, playfully. You're right. And just like that, my last shred of hope shattered. I didn't remember driving home. All I knew was that one second, I was in my car, shaking with rage, and the next, I was standing outside the house, staring at the front door like it was the only thing separating me from the truth I didn't want to accept. But I had to keep my head straight. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. I still had the recordings. I forced myself to walk inside calmly, pretending nothing had changed. Emily was already in the kitchen, acting like she hadn't just spent the morning betraying me. She smiled. Hey, babe. How was work? I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Fine, I said, keeping my voice steady. If she noticed the stiffness in my tone, she didn't show it. She kissed my cheek, humming to herself as she grabbed a coffee mug. I clenched my fists. She had no idea. She had no clue that I knew everything. But she'd find out soon enough. Because I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to end this. I couldn't sleep. Not after what I had heard. The words played on a loop in my mind. Emily's voice, soft and amused, Nathan's confident reassurance, their secret conversation in my own kitchen like I was nothing more than an afterthought. You're sure? Trust me. If he had any clue, do you think he'd still be acting normal? You're right. That last part made my stomach turn. The way she had laughed. Not nervous. Not regretful. Comfortable. Like this wasn't a mistake. Like she wasn't planning to stop. That's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit back and let them laugh behind my back. I wasn't going to let them control the truth. I was taking control. The next morning, I followed my routine. I got up, got dressed, ate breakfast with Emily, all while my heart pounded in my chest. Emily hummed as she sipped her coffee. Relaxed, carefree, oblivious. She had no idea what was coming. Heading out early today? She asked casually. I nodded. Yeah. Busy morning. She smiled, completely at ease. All right, have a good day, babe. I forced a small smile. You too. And with that, I left. But I didn't go far. I parked a block away, just out of sight, waiting for the moment she thought I was gone. It didn't take long. At 6:20 a.m. sharp, Emily walked outside. She wasn't rushing, wasn't nervous. Because to her, this was normal. Routine. I gritted my teeth as I watched her make her way to Nathan's house. And just like before, she didn't knock. She just slipped inside like she belonged there. But this time, I wasn't just watching. I was walking straight into the fire. I stepped out of the car and crossed the street. Each step felt heavier. My heart pounded, my fists clenched at my sides. No more waiting. No more doubts. This was it. I reached Nathan's front door. For a second, I hesitated. Then, I knocked. Hard. Silence. Then, after a few seconds, footsteps. The door opened slightly, just enough for Nathan to peek through. His expression shifted instantly. Shock. Panic. He knew. Hey man, he said, forcing a chuckle. Didn't expect to see you this early. I pushed the door open before he could stop me. And there she was. Emily. Standing in the middle of his living room. Her hair was a little messy. She wasn't wearing a jacket, even though it was cold outside. And her face, pure panic. Jason, she stammered, taking a step back. What are you? I raised my phone. And hit play. Their voices filled the room. Emily's. Nathan's. No one saw you, right? Of course not. But I feel like he's been acting weird lately. He doesn't know anything. The blood drained from Emily's face. Nathan cursed under his breath. I stared at them both, feeling nothing but cold, burning rage. You think I'm an idiot? I said, my voice eerily calm. You thought I wouldn't notice? Emily's mouth opened and closed, struggling for words. Jason, this isn't. I cut her off. How long? She blinked. What? How long have you been screwing him? Silence. Nathan rubbed his face. Look, man. I turned on him so fast he flinched. Shut your mouth, I snarled. You don't get to talk. Emily stepped forward, desperate. It's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, really? Because it seems pretty damn clear to me. She reached for my arm. Please, Jason, let's talk about this. I jerked away. Talk? Oh, now you want to talk. I shook my head, disgusted. You could have talked before you lied to my face every single day. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted to hurt you. Congratulations, I snapped. You failed. Her face crumpled. Jason. I turned to Nathan, my voice dangerously low. And you? I took a step toward him. My best friend since we were kids? You threw that away for what? For some sneaking around, lying, backstabbing garbage. He looked away, jaw tight. I didn't mean for it to happen. Another bitter laugh left my throat. That's what cheaters always say. Silence. Then, I turned back to Emily. And the rage faded, just for a second. Because looking at her now, standing there, tears streaming down her face, I felt something worse than anger. I felt nothing. The love. Gone. The trust. Shattered. There was nothing left to save. I exhaled slowly. I hope it was worth it, I said, voice empty. And with that, I turned and walked out the door. I didn't slam it. Didn't yell. I just left. Because this was the end. I don't remember driving home. 1 second, I was storming out of Nathan's house, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and my longest friendship. The next, I was standing in my own kitchen, staring blankly at the counter, my hands gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. The rage that had fueled me, that had carried me through that confrontation, was fading. And in its place, a crushing emptiness. The house felt different now. Colder. Lonelier. Everything in here had been a part of the life Emily and I built together. The coffee mugs she loved. The small plant she kept on the windowsill. The framed photos on the wall, all mocking me now, images of a couple who didn't exist anymore. Had she ever really loved me? Or had she just been waiting for something better to come along? I shut my eyes, breathing deeply, forcing myself to think clearly. What now? I couldn't stay here with her. That much was obvious. I couldn't look at her face and pretend like any of this was fixable. But I wasn't going to be the one to leave. This was her mess. And she was the one who was going to face it. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard the front door open. Emily. She had followed me home. Jason. Her voice was shaky. I didn't answer. I kept walking, heading straight to the bedroom. A moment later, she was behind me. Jason, please, just talk to me. I ignored her. I grabbed my duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Stop, she pleaded, stepping in front of me. We can fix this. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? How, Emily? I gestured wildly. With more lies? More sneaking around? Or were you planning to just wait until I found out on my own? Her face twisted in pain. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. That's what everyone says, I muttered, shoving clothes into the bag. You didn't mean for it to happen, but somehow it did. She reached for me, desperate. Jason, please, I still love you. I froze. Then, slowly, I turned to face her. You don't get to say that, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Not anymore. Tears streamed down her face. But I do love you. I shook my head. No, Emily. Love isn't just words. It's choices. And you made yours. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. A part of me should have felt something. Pity, maybe. Sadness. But I didn't. I just felt done. I'm not the one leaving, I said. You are. She lifted her head, eyes wide. What? You heard me. I zipped up my bag. Pack your things. You're moving out. Jason, this is our home. No, I cut her off. It was. But you killed that the moment you chose him. She shook her head, still crying. I don't have anywhere to go. I scoffed. I'm sure Nathan has a nice warm bed waiting for you. She flinched. That's not fair. You weren't thinking about fair when you were sneaking into his house every morning, I snapped. You weren't thinking about fair when you looked me in the eye and lied. She stared at me, completely broken. For a brief moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the texts. The mornings. The way she had laughed when Nathan said I had no idea. And any sympathy I had left vanished. Get out, I said, my voice like steel. Emily sobbed harder. Jason, please. Get out. She crumbled, but she didn't argue. She knew. She had lost me. It took her an hour to pack. 60 excruciating minutes of hearing her shuffle around the house, of watching her carry bags out to her car with red-rimmed eyes. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as she loaded the last of her things. She turned to me, one final time. Do you hate me? She whispered. I exhaled slowly. I thought about it. About all the years we spent together. The good times. The laughs. About the way I had once worshipped her. Then I thought about the lies. The betrayal. The way she had thrown it all away. Finally, I spoke. No, I said honestly. I don't hate you. Her face crumpled with relief, until I added, I just don't love you anymore. She let out a choked sob, then nodded. Without another word, she got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a long time after she left, just breathing, taking in the silence of my now empty house. And you know what? It felt better this way. Because sure, I had lost my wife. But I had gained something more important. Myself. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The house was too quiet. No more Emily humming in the kitchen. No more sounds of her soft footsteps padding across the hardwood floor in the morning. No more laughter that, in hindsight, had felt forced in those final months. Just silence. For the first few days, I welcomed it. Embraced it, even. I told myself I was better off. That I'd escaped something toxic before it could destroy me entirely. That I was free. But freedom was a strange thing. It didn't feel like a rush of relief or the start of a new beginning. It felt hollow. I spent my time existing rather than living, going through the motions, working, eating, sleeping. And at night, when I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of everything came back. The whispers. The stolen glances. The feeling of knowing something was wrong but convincing myself otherwise. And worst of all, the laughter. Her laugh. Nathan's laugh. The way they spoke about me like I was some fool, oblivious to their little secret. That was the part that stuck with me. That was the part one couldn't forgive. The final goodbye. A week after she left, Emily sent a text. "Emily, I just want to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been that morning when I stormed into Nathan's house. I wasn't shaking with betrayal or blinded by rage. I was just tired. I didn't respond. A few days later, she showed up at the house. I opened the door, blocking the entrance. She looked different, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. No makeup, puffy eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. She tried to smile. "Hey." I said nothing. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice soft. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "About what?" She swallowed hard. I made a mistake, Jason." I almost laughed. A mistake. That was such a small word for something so enormous. I shook my head. "No, Emily. You made a choice. Over and over again." Her eyes welled up. I was confused. "Stop," I cut her off. "You don't get to rewrite what happened. You weren't confused. You were selfish. And the worst part, you didn't even feel guilty until you got caught." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I miss you." I felt nothing. I searched myself for anger, for longing, for some part of me that still cared. But there was nothing left. Just a dull, fading ache. "I don't miss you," I said, my voice calm. "Not anymore." She flinched like I had slapped her. I could have said more. I could have let her stand there in the doorway, sobbing, begging for something I no longer had to give. But I was done. So I stepped back and closed the door. Locked it. And this time, she didn't knock again. Moving on. Nathan sold his house 2 months later. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he just couldn't stand the way I looked at him when we crossed paths. Either way, he was gone. Emily. I didn't hear from her again after that day. And honestly, that was for the best. Healing wasn't easy. Some nights were worse than others. Some days, I still caught myself reaching for my phone, half expecting to see her name pop up on my screen. But slowly, the weight of it all started to lift. One morning, I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and really looked at the house, the place we had once built a life together. It didn't feel haunted anymore. It just felt like mine. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. Because this was the start of something new. And I was finally free. The end.